So welcome everybody to another presentation of the online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Arehart and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And in this edition of the Meetup, our 316th, yes, being recorded on Thursday, August 27th, 2026 at noon US Eastern, we got me. And by the way, I'm hoping next week or in coming weeks we'll have others. I'm in discussions with folks, so this isn't just the Charlie show. But last week I did the talk on hidden gems in ColdFusion 2025, and then this week I'm doing this talk called Migrating Apps to ColdFusion 2025 from earlier versions. So I'll explain that in a moment. Before I get into the talk, I just want to share, as I do at the top of all these, that if you want to tell anybody about the meetup, there in the bottom of the screen, you can see the link. It's coldfusionmeetup.com is the easiest way to get there. It takes you to the meetup.com site for the ColdFusion meetup channel group I guess it is. And then also all these sessions are recorded, and you guys that are watching right now are watching it live, and when it's over it'll be there recorded for folks, and I'll go in, like I said, and tweak the little bit. And anyway, you can get to those past presentations at recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com, and that just takes you to the playlist of all of the recordings of all the meetings back to 2015. All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And yeah. Oh, volume is a little low. Well, that's interesting that you say the volume's low. I should ask, does anybody else feel that way? I usually, I'm just using the same mic that I always use, and I work with people every day, and I hadn't anybody say that the volume was low. This StreamYard system could maybe be messing with it. I didn't perceive that last week, and nobody said anything, but thank you, Kevin. All right, good. All right, cool. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here we go. Oh, and I hear a little bit of feedback, which is weird. So there shouldn't be any other audio coming in. Anyway, here again is the title. There is my contact information there. You can reach me all these various ways. And also you can get the slide deck for this presentation already. Usually the slide's sitting up there in front of the, conference. As a quick reminder, this is a talk that I did give at CF Summit in Vegas, and the other one too. I gave both of them. And so this would usually been sitting there at the front of the screen so people could get a head start grabbing that QR code, or just go to that URL. It's just that URL that it takes you to. All right. So we're going to talk in this presentation about a few things. Some might surprise you. First, I'm going to talk about some general CF migration tips, things that might help you regardless of what version of CF you're moving from or to. And also these are things that could benefit you when you're moving to Lucy or moving to Boxlang or vice versa. There are some general things that you should keep in mind that you sometimes blame the engine, and it's not the engine's fault. Then I will move on to talking about compatibility issues specifically introduced in CF 2025. And most people would think that's what this talk is mostly about. And it's a good bit of it. But I'll also talk briefly about if there were, not weren't many, but if you were skipping from CF 2021, what might you have had to deal with if you'd moved to 23, which you would inherit in going to 25. So we'll talk briefly about those. Not as many, not nearly as many issues. Then this is very important, and it'll be a good chunk of this, is that you need to be aware that issues get introduced sometimes by updates to either CF25 or 23 or 21. And sometimes you might not have kept your old 23 or 21 updated, and your move to 25 makes you think things are broken because of 25, and there are things that would have broken if you just kept 23 or 21 up to date, because sometimes changes are introduced by updates. So again, we'll talk more about that later, just laying the groundwork of what we're going to talk about. And then I'll wrap up with tools and resources. So yes, there are tools that can help you understand and find problems in your code due to compatibility issues. And so that'll be, for some people, the most valuable thing they get out of this, because the rest of the stuff you can look up, but sometimes you don't even know there are tools that exist. So a classic question would be, how easy is this going to be? People often want to ask, how easy is it going to be to move to CF 2025? Well, it's going to depend on how far back you are, right? If you're on CF 2023, that would be easier than if you were on 21, because like I said, you'd have to deal with, you'd skip to 23. If you're on 2018, you didn't deal with the changes that were introduced in 21, and some of those things propagate forward. So again, it just depends on where you're coming from. More importantly, I want to say that for some people, even moving to say CF 2025, it could be trivial. I have helped people for whom it was really not a big deal at all. Their app pretty much just worked. Sure. And then there's others for whom the very first page fails and they think they fixed that, and then the next page fails and they start to think, crap, we're never going to get this done. But I'll say that sometimes the challenges are overstated, or over inferred, overinterpreted, because there might be some solution to that problem. So we'll talk about that. I'll just say that for most people, it's going to be somewhere in the middle. That's usually the issue, is that you're somewhere in this spectrum of possibilities. And my goal here is to help you get over those various common humps that you're going to trip over. And here again is the presentation slide deck. So this talk, you can go get the PDF of what I'm offering right now. And let me say, if you got it earlier, it'll have an earlier date. Like if you happen to get it yesterday or last week, it was the one from CF Summit. Don't use that one. Look for one that has today's date. If you go to the site, and when you download the PDF, on the front page where I tell you when it was updated, you should see that it was updated today, because I tweaked it today with something that I'll show you later. And so the date should say August 27th. It could say August 20th because I'd posted a slight variation earlier. But the point is, that would, as long as it says August, you're going to be very close to what we're going to talk about here. All right. Quickly about myself, because some people go, hey, Charlie, we see you do these presentations, but we don't know what you do. And some people have been around for a long time, but not everybody knows. So yes, I've been around a long time, 30 years of ColdFusion experience, presented to most of the CF conferences that have happened. 20 years focused specifically on CF server troubleshooting. When I say CF there, I mean Lucy and Boxlang now as well. I just help solve problems as an independent consultant. If you or your team have any CF related problems, reach out to me. I help solve most of them in less than an hour. I explain as we go. And honestly, most problems are really something that, because that's all I do, I sometimes can solve in an hour something that you guys might have struggled with for hours or days or weeks. Trust me, I've come into situations like that, and that quickly we're done. And hey, if you don't find it valuable, then you won't pay for the time. It's as simple as that. So you have no reason not to at least try. I'd love to try to help. Any problem you have at all, bring it to me. You can find more about my rates and approach and an online calendar to grab a slot at carehart.org/consulting. It's really that simple. But I'm not selling anything in this session. I'm just giving away this knowledge. That's what I usually do in these presentations. So let's move on to this stuff about migration. And I want to say this first thing is, don't blame CF unfairly. Or again, if you're moving to Lucy, don't blame Lucy unfairly. Or don't blame Boxlang unfairly, because sometimes the problem isn't about the engine that you're moving to. There's other causes. So one common one is that you might, and you or somebody that sets things up for you, might have failed to bring along CF administrator settings or Java configuration settings that were used in the previous setup of your CF, or again, Lucy. I'll just say CF from now on. Mostly I'm in those generic things. I'm talking about any of the engines. If they didn't bring along those settings, then things might not work. And that's got nothing to do with being on CF25. It's just you forgot to bring those settings. And you might think obvious things like, data sources, sure. But there's lots of other, there's like 50 pages of stuff in the CF admin. Not every page has something interesting, but several do. And sometimes you might have needed some tweak and somebody didn't bring that tweak along. So I have a whole talk on the topic of migrating your settings from one CF to another, or migrating from CF to Lucy, or now Boxlang. So if you're interested in that topic, go see that talk at my site, carehart.org/presentations. In fact, let me take a quick little show you, if you've not been there. This is the site, carehart.org/presentations, or if you just go to the site, there's the button up there for presentations. And here we are on that page, and here's, this talk today, moving to CF 2020. Oh, sorry, this is what I'm going to be giving in CF Summit East in a couple months. They've asked some of the speakers from CF Summit West to repeat their talks, and since I did two, I wanted to combine them into one. So I'm combining the hidden gems and the migrating talk today into moving to CF 2025 cheers and challenges. I'll just condense it into one talk. Anyway, there's the talk for today. And down here is migrating CF admin settings between versions safely. So all you got to do is click on the link and it drops down to that. And there's the title and there's the description and there's a link if you want to share it. And then here's where I gave it or when I'm going to give it. And there's a link to the PDF. And if there's a recording like the one I did last week, if I scroll down just a line, you'll see there's the YouTube recording for the talk last week on hidden gems. So anyway, you can always get these slides very easily. And so I have this one on migrating admin settings. I'm pretty sure that one was recorded as well as the PDF being available. Moving on, maybe somebody applied some CF update, right? You move to the new version of CF typically, and then you do the updates that are available. And some of you know that ColdFusion updates are cumulative. So, if you move to CF 2025 today and it's currently on update 12, you could just go right to update 12. You don't have to do the ones before that. Just go right to 12. Well, whatever ones you do, sometimes errors happen. And if an error happens, it can break things. And again, you might find your app doesn't work and you think ColdFusion 2025 is to blame when instead it was a failure of the update. So I've got a whole bunch of resources on that. I also want to make this point that maybe a problem that is to you new to 2025 would have happened if you just updated one of your prior CF versions. So, and let me just say this too, maybe the new CF runs on a more recent version of Java than you'd used before. You may not be aware of that, but CF 2025, for example, runs on Java 21, whereas CF 23 had run on Java 17, CF 21 had run on Java 11. And some Java changes could affect your application. Usually they don't. I talked about this more in the talk last week. Usually we don't notice this, but it's possible. So I don't know if I have this coming up in this slide, but let me just say for a moment that on all these last couple of points, I have on my site, if I go back up to the top of the page, a section called CF Update, and it's just carehart.org/CF Update. And on it, I have discussions of things related to updating CF, the Java under CF, the web server connector, the PMT, CF Builder, Fusion Reactor, Lucy, the Tomcat underlying CF, issues about upgrading versus blah, blah, blah. So I'll just say that some of those things I just talked about, I cover those things more in this CF update page, and it's a good bit of stuff. I'm not going to go over it now, but it just goes on and on and on. And yeah, there's a weird zebra effect where the top part of my page is white and the bottom is black. I'll get to that eventually. Cobbler's children have no shoes. So moving on. All right, so. And then another really important problem to consider when you face a problem moving to, quote, a new version of CF or Lucy or Boxing or anything really, is you probably have moved to a new box, a new server or to a cloud or a new VM, whatever. You've moved to something new. Well, heck, it might be that it's got a new IP address that's not recognized by some other things you're trying to talk to, database server, mail server, API servers calling in or calling out. Just keep that in mind. You'll be inclined to think something's wrong with ColdFusion when in fact it's just, hey, this not about ColdFusion at all. Or maybe you didn't set up the web server in the same way it was set up on the previous server. Again, that's got nothing to do with ColdFusion. Maybe there were some rewrites that should have been done that didn't get brought over. Or if you're on IIS, you didn't install the URL rewrite tool because it's not there by default. You have to install it. Or there might be file permission issues, right? Anybody that does this stuff, you've seen that before. You bring stuff over, you copy and paste it, or you clone it, or whatever. And maybe there's a problem with file permissions that have to be corrected, and that's why things don't work. Then also you might be changing the operating system, right? Or maybe you're changing the version of the database to a new version, or a new web server version, or one web server to another. These are things that you got to keep in mind. If someone does all this at once, sure, it's good to have a nice new clean slate, but just be aware you're going to be running into things that really have nothing to do with ColdFusion itself. And if you're not looking closely, you're inclined to blame it. So just be aware that these are just some of the issues that you might encounter. I want to throw this out too, because I've actually had to have people do this. You might find that if you just install the prior version that you were using, which was good, and this new one is bad, you put the old version on the new box and you go, hey, it doesn't work either, right? And then that proves that it's not about the move to the new version. It's something else. And again, it could be that you forget to bring the admin settings onto that old version, or it could be these other things that I just talked about. So just keep those things in mind. But we're not going to belabor this anymore. But what else we will not cover? This is not talk about what's new and changed in 25. I've covered that in my Hidden Gems talk. It's not a what's new talk, which that didn't even cover everything that was new. There's docs, of course, with ColdFusion. There's a what's new page. And let me just show you really quick. I think I have that Yeah, no, I don't have that, but just trust me, I talked about it in the last week's talk. If you just Google what's new in ColdFusion 2025, there's a tremendous page of stuff that describes what's new with links to far more on it. And there's the CFML reference and the developer's guide. Those are all sections of the docs that have lots of detail about new features of CF. There's also blog posts that the CF team has put up at the time of the release, and you can usually find them at the what's called the ColdFusion portal, which if you just go to coldfusion.adobe.com, that's the portal. And some of you have never been there, and others of you have been there. The point is, go there, and there's a blog section, and you can see blog posts. And if you look back over the last year, CF 2025 was introduced in February of 2025, so over the last year and a half, almost 2 years. They even started talking about it before it came out. You can find stuff over the last couple of years from them. And then my Hidden Gems talk, which is at the PRR.org/presentations. And I cover a lot of different stuff that also might interest you. And I'd presented that talk. That's funny. I don't know why I said that. I was thinking about the talk I'm giving, but it's the next talk. It's not this talk. Anyway, I presented the Hidden Gems talk last year, and then I revised it at CF Summit. That's what matters. And I offered it online last week. So again, go check those out, the PDF and the recording for that online version of the presentation. Okay, moving on. I'm also going to take my little picture off just because you don't need to see that. All right. So let's talk about the compatibility issues, right? The bulk of this stuff that you might have thought, yeah, this is what we're going to talk about. Okay, and we're only 15 minutes into when we've been talking. So one of the big things in 2025 to be aware of is that Adobe has accelerated both the deprecation of and the removal, specifically the removal of things in CF 2025. So some of you know that CF's long had a deprecated features page. There's the URL for it. I'm just going to hop over there and show it to you. I had it here ready to go in my browser. So if you just Google ColdFusion deprecated, or whatever search engine you like to use, AI engine, whatever, you'll usually find among the first results will be this page, the deprecated features page. And in it, they list down the left the things, and sometimes they have links, sometimes they don't. And on the right, when was it deprecated, when was it marked as unsupported, and when has it been removed. And right off the bat, you can see some things that are deprecated newly in 25, and then things that are removed in 25. Right? And we'll talk about some of these things. Right now, it's not important that we focus on them. I just want to show you, I'm going to page down, and 25, 25, 25, 25, 25, 25. And then 2018 and 2021. And I'm sure there's some 2023s in there. And there's 11 in there and 16 in there. So this is not new. This is not new to 25. There's been deprecations marked for removals and removals of all kinds of stuff in 21, in 25, in 2018. It's not new that they're removing stuff. It's just there's a good bit that is removed in 25 that, if you were on 23, those other removals were already done. If you're moving from 21, well, then look in here and see if there's stuff removed in 23. Now, I'm not going to talk about them in this talk. And certainly if you're on 2018, there was stuff removed in 21. And if you're on 2016, there's stuff that was moved in 2018. So you need to look over this. That's all I want to do is communicate that this page is here for you to look at and see what gets removed. Now, it's long listed things that were deprecated. And let's be clear about a couple things. Deprecated, which, by the way, is not depreciated. You see people all the time saying depreciated. Depreciated means it's, lost its value. Deprecated means you should no longer be using it. And that thing tells you what things have been deprecated. You should no longer use them. And when were they deprecated? We just saw that. And it meant that they were going to be removed. So you should be reconsidering using them. Don't use them. But as some of you know, there have been things listed as deprecated for 25 years. Well, in December of 2024, Adobe announced several changes in this blog post right here called Important Notice of Upcoming Deprecations, Removals in CF 2025. And one of the big changes was a key change about what they regarded to be the life cycle for deprecation. So they said that we're starting with CF 2025, features marked as deprecated in 25. For now, there's some things that were deprecated in the past that are still working. Hold that thought. But they're saying if something is deprecated in 25, and we just saw there's some stuff indicated deprecated in 25, let's check it out. Those things will move to unsupported in the next release, whatever that is. It's not going to be CF 2026. Might be a CF 2027. Anyway, they'll move to that unsupported, and then they would remove to the removed. I mean, they would be removed in whatever the version is after that, which, maybe it'll be CF 2028. We don't know. Point is, again, I'll show you in a moment some of those things, but today we're focused on what was removed in 25. There are some things that have been marked as deprecated, and they will be in the future removed. So one more reason to get off of things once they're marked as deprecated. And it clarified the definition of terms. So deprecated meant they recommend against using it, but it will still get bug fixes. That's good. Security fixes. Deprecated and unsupported means it won't get bug fixes, but it will get security fixes. That's really nice of them to at least grant that. And then finally, removed is obviously no longer available. And we're going to talk today about things that were removed. It used to talk about things that were retired, and retired meant, well, they took it out, but if you want to put it back, you can put it back. Well, they've gotten rid of that. No more retired things. So there will be no further retirement of things. It'll be removed and it's gone. And they did start removing things, and you may hit some of them right out of the gates. Let's talk about some of those. I want to talk not in the order they presented them on that screen, but in the order I'm finding people trip over them. So parameter exists is a function. This is one of those ones that's been marked as deprecated since like CF3, literally 26, 27, 28 years ago. This was marked as deprecated. I'm not going to go into it in any detail other than to say, if your code uses parameter exists, and it may well with anybody that's been around for a while, or code that was written by somebody that's been around for a while, you should switch to use is defined. And I'll leave you to look those up. I don't want to demo everything here, but let me just say parameter exists. I'll show an example later when I talk about tools. I'll show you an example, but just quickly, parameter exists, you would pass it the name of a variable, and it was basically saying, does that variable exist? And somebody would go, well, that's what is defined is. Yeah, well, is defined was added later, like in CF3, it was added, and it took not a name of a variable, but a string in quotes, right, typically? Or it could be a variable whose value, when evaluated, was the name of a variable, and the string could be appended to with another variable. Is defined was just more flexible. Now, granted, I know that many of you will say, well, you shouldn't be using is defined either. You should use struct key exists. Yes, you should. That's another discussion for another day. The point is, if you're just using simply parameter exists, which just took a name of a variable, you need to change it to using is defined that takes typically a quoted string name of the variable. I'm not going to go any further than that, just to say you can look it up to find out more about it on your own. Another one that was removed a long time, maybe you never used it, but some people used it because it was one of the ways you could kind of achieve cross-site scripting protection, was HTML edit format. Now, maybe you don't use it, but if you did use it, if your code does use it, it's not there anymore in CF 2025. And guess what? It was replaced by encode for HTML that was introduced in CF10, 14 years ago. Now, maybe you use encode for HTML, maybe you don't. A lot of people just have code that they don't touch. And I'm just saying, unfortunately, this is the version where you gotta deal with this stuff finally. And these things have been marked deprecated for years. Maybe you weren't paying attention, or you figured, hey, they never take it away. They just say it's deprecated. Well, they pulled the rug out from us. They are deprecated. They're now removed. So you've got to address them. Again, I'll talk later about tools to help you find them. But for moving on, just to give you a heads up, get template path. That was, the original one that came along some years later with get base template path. I never quite understood why that was so much better. But anyway, that's what you should use. Anywhere you use get template path, you should use get base template path. I'm pretty sure that one, you can just do a one-for-one find and replace. Same with the HTML format, HTML edit format. I'm pretty sure you can just do a find and replace. You can't with the first one, but you can with these. CF header has long had a status text attribute. Usually you just said CF header status code equals some number, but you could also say status text equals some string. Well, Tomcat and the Java servlet spec changed to not allow that for whatever reason, some security thing. So Adobe had to follow suit and remove it because Tomcat wouldn't do it. And so they just removed it. So that attribute, you can still use CF header, you just can't use that attribute. So you need to find it and remove it. And again, I'll show you later some tools to help you find it. Of course, you could just use a good tool that searches your code and do you use the word status text. By the way, be careful. Don't look for CF header status text because you might say CF header status code and then status text. So just look for the word status text. It's probably not something you use in any reason other than this tag. or the script equivalents. Again, it's also about the script version of CF header. If you'd used web services, publishing or consuming them, when it first came out in like CF6, it was based on something called Axis, and it was the first version of Axis, Axis 1 at the time. And then along came in CF10, Axis 2. And back in CF10, 2012, we could switch to using Axis 2. Some people did, some people didn't. Well, now you have to. You can no longer use Axis 1. And maybe you don't do web services, so it doesn't matter. But if you do, either publish or consume them, they need to be using Axis 2. And there's resources you can find that discuss that in more detail. And the ColdFusion docs, of course, do discuss it. We'll leave it at that. Now, this one might be a bigger deal for some people, not a bigger deal. And I see Kevin said hit that one in Coldbox. I'm assuming you were talking about the, well, I'll ask you to clarify which one you were talking about. He says hit that one in Coldbox. We'll just wait to see what he types in reply. But moving on, CFMX compat, this is a big deal for some people. If you've used the encryption functions in CF or the hashing functions in CF, those had long had a default algorithm of CFMX compat. And that was removed as the default algorithm, starting with updates in CF 21 and 23. And 25 also inherited it, that you could no longer use that CFMX compat as an algorithm for doing encryption or hashing or a couple of other functions. And when that update came out, I wrote about it at the time. You can find out more if you just Google this. But I want to share a little tip that a lot of people don't know this. You'll find that in 25, you cannot even use that. There was a JVM argument back in 23 and 21. You cannot use that JVM argument in 25 to allow you to continue to use that CFMX compat as the default. And now in 25, you cannot even change it to use that. You cannot. But check this out. MD5 is just another name for what they called back then CFMX compat. So yeah, you can change your code where you use encryption functions. If you want to keep the old algorithm, there's arguments against that. But if you just want to maximize compatibility, you can just use the word MD5 as the name of the encryption algorithm. Problem solved. Again, in 25, you'll have to do that. In 23 or 21, there was a JVM arg that said, just let that be the default. Don't change to some new default. Anyway, you should choose a better algorithm. MD5 is not great, but for some people's needs, they're not creating Fort Knox. They don't need to worry so much about that. Anyway, you might need to. The point is, you can use that MD5. Thank you, Kevin, for clarifying. It was CF header you were talking about. Awesome. And Mary Jo was saying that was a big one. I'm sure she was talking about this CFMX compat. Now, again, just want to take a moment to clarify this, because in 21 or 23, there was provided a JVM arg that if you added it to your CF startup, JVM arguments in the admin, for example, you could continue to use the encryption and hashing functions and let them default to this old thing called CFMX compat. Or you could have changed that code to use a new algorithm. If you did that, you needed to decrypt stuff you stored somewhere in the old algorithm and then re-encrypt it with the new algorithm. Again, I talked about that in a blog post at the time. But you could have switched it to the word MD5. No one really talked about that back then. In 2025, you cannot use that JVM argument. You cannot use that CFMX compat. It's not the default. You can't use it. You must, if you want to keep it, you must tell it to use in your encrypt function or hash function. There's an argument or attribute in the tags that use it that would be MD5. So I'll leave it at that. Hope that helps somebody. Moving on. Probably won't affect most people, but if you do CF thread stuff, and if in your CF threads you took advantage of the ability to terminate a thread, that was not something many people did, but if you did, that got taken away because of an underlying Java change, and because of that change, they had to remove that action equals terminate or the thread terminate function, so can't do that anymore. And there's a few other generally less widely used things, various features or function arguments or tag attributes, so I'll leave you to look into those in the documentation. They discuss that. Now, this is another one that we should take a moment to discuss. They removed what's called tags as script, the CFCs that were providing for tags as script, and then this other thing called service layer CFC. So let me explain. There used to be these CFCs which allowed you to call things like CF query back in prior to CF11, which enabled all tags as script, and they created a CF query, and there was query execute, and there's CF mail. They literally made it so you could do almost anything in script. Prior to that, instead, they told you that if you wanted to do a query in script, well, there was a CFC, and they just showed you examples that said if you say new query parentheses and pass in these arguments, or create object component query and then call its methods, that would be a way in script to do a query. Now, eventually they did do query execute, but there was also ones for other things. Let me show you. This called a query CFC that was found in this directory called CFusion custom tags com Adobe ColdFusion. I'm going to show you my CF 2023 just to put this in perspective. Yeah, so here's my CF 2023 up here at the top. You can see it's in CF 23 CFusion custom tags com Adobe ColdFusion. And look, there's, query CFC, there was a POP CFC, there was an IMAP CFC, an HTTP, FTP. So these were CFC implementations of the equivalent CF tags, CFDB info, CF PDF, CF search, CF stored proc. But you couldn't do that in script, right? So they created these CFCs. This was way back in time that they did this. CF9 had added these guys, and then 901 had added these guys, and then 10 added these guys. So those are what people leveraged to do script before CF11 allowed us to just do CF query and CF stored proc. You didn't need this stuff anymore. Well, that was in CF11 in 2014. People didn't get the memo. They didn't take their time to look and see that these things were deprecated. The old ways, when they created the new way, they deprecated the old way. Well, it's just another one of those things that hung around as a boat anchor, and many people's code still looks like this new query or create object component query or whatever of these other things. This is a tricky one because you can't just change this to a CF query in script. You have to change it from being a call to a CFC and its methods and its arguments to whatever the properties of the CF query or CF stored proc equivalent in script would be. So again, I'll leave you to look in the docs to learn how you'd need to deal with it. You just have to deal with it. I'm just letting you know you've got to deal with it. And Mary Jo said she got hit by that one too. I believe you're talking about these sort of things. I wish there was a timer thing. Oh, there it is, 11:32. That was, a minute and a half ago. So I assume you're talking about this stuff. Cool. Now, related to this is something called service layer CFCs. Maybe none of you ever used this. It was also called CFAAS, for CF as a service. And it was for calling upon some of these things from the outside, which is a curious choice that somebody made many, many years ago. Hey, maybe you'll want to call on CF from the outside as an API call to do a CF mail. They let you do it. And eventually they realized that wasn't a good idea. And let me tell you, they were stored in CFusion's www root CF IDE services. I'm not going to bother showing you that. That's where they were up until 2023. I just want to take for a second and say that starting in CF 2016, so 10 years ago, Adobe no longer let you expose the CF IDE as a virtual directory when you ran the web server configuration tool. It didn't set up CF IDE as available publicly. They said, no, you're going to use the built-in web server, 8500, whatever, to get to the admin. And these things were cut off then. Well, by then they were long deprecated. And, folks who used them probably tripped over this back in CF 2016. But sometimes people did things to get around exposing this, and there were ways. And finally, about a year and a half ago, Adobe put in a fix that you cannot get around it. You cannot expose the CF IDE anymore. Well, along the way, that would have precluded you being able to do these. So most people aren't doing this, but some people might still be. So I'm just letting you know you cannot do that. Cool. Okay. So the bottom line is you have to change to using the script equivalents that were introduced in CF11. And if you didn't know, in CF11 in 2014, what was that, 12 years ago? Yeah, 12 years ago, CF fundamentally changed CF script, and almost every tag can be just run as a script. And there's a simple documentation that shows pretty much how any tag could be converted to the equivalent in script. Also want to point out that Pete Freitag covered this stuff a bit in a post he did, and I want you guys to know about it. It's at Pete's blog, and it's called ColdFusion 2025 Breaking. So he covered some of these things, including some of what we're talking about here. Just want to shout out that Pete was on top of this stuff back then as well. Pete's great. All right, more features removed in CF 2025. Some of the less used things probably won't care. The mobile feature set that was introduced in CF11, it never really took off. And Adobe even, I remember, I think it was Rakshith standing up at the CF Summit, or maybe it was a subsequent person, I can't remember who, but said that they admitted about 5 years ago that that was a mistake. It never shouldn't have been done. So anyway, that mobile feature set, which you probably never used, is gone. The Flash stuff, Flex related stuff, that's been gone from Adobe for a long time. Those are finally now no longer available in CF. Thing called XML forms, you probably never used it. Com and decom, few people were using it. Usually if they were, it's just they didn't realize that they could have replaced it with something far more modern many years ago. They're just being forced now. It's time to get off that old stuff. Now, there's some things you might still use. I want you to be aware of this. Some of you probably don't use Spry Dataset, but you might be using CF Menu, CF Tree, CF Tooltip, CF Calendar, CF Table, CF Media Player. If you're using those things, they too have been deprecated for a long time. You were told not to do it, and some of them were retired, and you could bring them back. Well, they're removed now. In CF 2025, they're gone. And basically, these are things that generate JavaScript to provide for what they do. CF Table doesn't. I don't think CF Table should have been removed, but anyway, it was removed. And sorry to see you go. But these things use JavaScript, and people have for years said don't use these things because they relied on an underlying library called often it was the Yahoo UI, YUI toolkit that wasn't updated for over 15 years now. So it's finally been removed. CF Inputs autosuggest. Yeah, it was pretty cool if you knew about it. And that's gone. The pass-through and source for tooltip, those are gone. I'll just say there's jQuery and similar sort of alternatives, and Ray Camden. He had done a blog post called, or a whole resource called CFUI the Right Way, where he showed, and this was like 15 years ago, that he showed various alternative ways to do these sort of things. So people have been saying for years, stop using them. People just, got our heads down and working on our job. We don't think about things we don't need to worry about, right? Well, now you got to worry about it. That's the bottom line, is they've removed things that they'd long said they were going to remove. And they just kind of all went out. This one you may not deal with, but some of you might. For decades, ColdFusion had a feature where you could encode your CFML templates so that they were obfuscated. You couldn't see the source code anymore. And you could put onto your web server or put on some client's web server a CF file that if you opened it, it was binary. Now, was it encrypted? No. It was encoded using a tool called CF Encode, which was in the CFusion bin folder. Maybe never noticed it there, but it's called CF Encode. And it was called CF Crypt originally, way back when, in like CF3. It never did encryption. And people started coming up with ways to decode it. So they had to admit, hey, we can't call it CF Crypt. So they called it CF Encode. Well, it's now been removed. And not only has that tool been removed, but the ability to run encoded templates has been removed. If you run an encoded template, you will get in response in the browser or wherever, ColdFusion no longer supports files encoded with CF Encode. Now again, some of you will never ever deal with this because nobody ever encoded stuff. But others of you maybe didn't do it, but maybe you downloaded, or somebody in your organization downloaded years ago some thing, a custom tag or something that does something, and the person you bought it from or got it from, they encoded it so you couldn't look at it. And all of a sudden you may find you get this error. Well, that's what this means, is that they had encoded it and that's not allowed anymore. And you might go, well, crap, what are we going to do? We don't have the source code. What are we supposed to do? Well, let me tell you, there's a couple things you can do. As for finding if you have any such code that is encoded this way, if you just use whatever file search tool you want, looking for in the text of CFM files, the strings, either Alaire ColdFusion with the space template or Adobe ColdFusion with the space template, those words were put into the top of the file among the binary crap. And any search tool can look through the strings of your CF templates and find it. So in your editor, you've got find tools. I like File Locator. It's free. File Locator Lite is free. If you're on Windows, it's an awesome tool. grep, of course, on Linux, and command line of Mac. And there's other tools for both Mac and Linux and Windows. Everybody's got their favorite file search tools. I'm just saying this is the string that you can search for, and you will find if you have any such encoded templates. So you might go, well, what's that going to help me with? Hold that thought. There have long existed tools to decode such encoded files, right? So that's good news now. It was bad news then because, it wasn't really protecting people quite the way they thought it was. But anyway, here's the good news. You need to know that if you go to this GitHub repo called CF Decrypt at diskcomp, that's been there for years. It's not been changed in years, but I've run it. It works, and you'll just download it and put it in a place and run it. I'll leave you to deal with that. I don't have time to get into it now. I'm just saying, if you go get that tool, you will be able to use it to get the source code of templates that were encoded. Yes. Okay. So if you have need for help with that, I can help. Again, 15 minutes, we could get it up and running, and then you can go to town using it. I want to say that the feature that's called encoded templates was also removed from CF 23 and 21. So again, this is not new in 25 if you've been keeping up with updates in May of last year. So 14, 16 months ago, if you'd done the updates to 23 that came out then, the ability to use encoded templates started failing there. And again, I blogged about it then, and I talked about these tools then and this search string then. So you can find my blog post from May of 25 to learn more about this as well. Now, back then, those on CF 23 and 21 were given a JVM argument to undo the change. That does not work with 25. So again, 25 had already come out in February of that year. It did not support these. It had removed these. Then they finally said, okay, we got to do it with the older versions too. And they did it. And they said, but if you need to keep it on, here's a JVM arg that if you put it in your JVM args, you'll still be able to do run encoded templates. That's what it says, is encode, decryption, enable, false. If you said decryption, actually, I guess it's backwards, true. You'd want it to be able to enable it. You'd say true. My bad. I should have said true there. Anyway, let's move on. You get it. And if you have any questions, I can help. Again, let me know. Reach out, follow up, whatever. Now, anticipating future removals, there are things, I said this earlier, but I want to repeat, there are things that were marked as deprecated now as of 25. You should think about finding alternatives because some release is going to come out that they're going to remove it. So one is the CAR feature, the ColdFusion archive feature. That's an admin feature that allows you to export admin settings like data sources and schedule tasks and mappings. You could export them to an XML file that was then zipped up into a CAR file, ColdFusion archive, and then you could take that CAR file to another CF instance and import them. So that was cool. You could export out of one, import into the other. It's been around forever. Some people use it all the time. Some people never use it. Well, let me just tell you, in CF 2021, Adobe did introduce CF Setup as a command line tool, and that CF Setup command line tool can export whatever settings you want to a JSON file, and you can encrypt it if you wanted to. And then that file can be brought over and imported using CF Setup on another machine. And some of you know about CF Config from Command Box, and you could use that as well. But this was provided by Adobe. Another thing that's marked for, deprecated for now, and that means in the future going to be removed, is the sandbox security feature. Now, again, some people never ever use this, didn't know it was there. I wrote about it, 15, 20 years ago. It's still on my site. If you go to my site, you can find my articles and read this Adobe Dev Center article, a couple of articles I did. It was a great feature, but many people never got around to using it. And the underlying Java security manager is being removed in Java 25. And so the next version of CF is probably going to run on that. And when it does, this is probably going to have to be removed. So we'll see. I mean, that's what it looks like. Use of Microsoft Access. These are not gone. Make sure you hear me. These are not gone, but they are going in the future. So stop using them. This is one that people have talked about for decades. You shouldn't be using Access. You shouldn't be using ODBC. And some of you go, wait, ODBC, I thought that's how everything worked. No, it's not. Since CF6, it's been JDBC. CF still has in the admin data sources the ability to set up an ODBC data source. And I still see people to this day set up an ODBC data source connecting to a SQL Server database. It's like, no, you don't need to do that. There's a SQL Server provided driver with ColdFusion, and it's a JDBC driver. So anyway, you have to go through intentional hoops to use ODBC. Stop using it. And if you're using something that you think you must, I'm telling you, it's not that you must. I'm sure there's another way to get to your data source besides ODBC. And if there isn't, well, unfortunately, in the future, you're going to have to stop using it. For now, you can still use it. DB2 is going to be removed in the future, they're saying here, so be aware of that. There's a thing called the Tomcat Legacy Cookie Processor, probably never mattered to anybody, but there it is, it's going away in the future. And then the RSA algorithm for doing fingerprinting and CFFTP for SFTP, STPS, that's going away. So anyway, and event gateways in the future, specifically the SMS and same time ones are going away. All right, let's switch gears and talk about other challenges of migrating to 25. One is the licensing change. It's not, affecting language or coding, but you should be aware of the licensing change as of CF25. It's now subscription only. No more perpetual license. You can't buy a perpetual license for 25 and beyond. The free trial is still there. The free developer edition is still there. Don't get that wrong. You don't have to pay Adobe to use them, but to use a production version of ColdFusion 25, you'll need to get a subscription now. And I want to say this too, the pricing really hasn't changed. If you look at what it would cost to upgrade from one version of CF to the next, they always offered a 50% discount. If you looked at the cost over 4 years of going, say CF21 and then to CF23, over the 4 years you did that, divided it by 48 months, that's the monthly cost that you get CF 2025. It's $760 a year for standard and like $22.90 for enterprise. I covered that more in the other talk. Anyway, I just want to say you can learn more about that later. Now, I want to tell you, when you start looking into these license things, you're going to learn this stuff now called NUL for named user license and FRL for feature restricted license. And it's very confusing to us because we go, wait, whose name are we restricting the use of ColdFusion to? And what features are being restricted? Let me just say, stop. Those names don't mean what we think they mean, to quote Indigo Montoya. You keep using that word. It does not mean what you think it means. These applied to other Adobe products, and the CF team had to follow their, path. So just trust me, you'll choose to either get an NUL license or an FRL license, and you can read in the docs, which I'll show you in a moment, what those are about, but they're not what you think. They're not about naming who can use ColdFusion or limiting what features can be used. And the FRL has variants for offline and online and isolated. I'll just tell you, check this out. Go to this page called ColdFusion New Licensing Activation, and it's got lots of explanation. And then on the left, it's got a navigational toolbar on the left with subsections that you can read. So go read that stuff, or talk to Adobe, or talk to a reseller. The guys that sell Fusion Reactor, Integral is the company, they have buy-adobe-software.com as a reseller site. You can buy it from them. If you don't want to deal with Adobe, you can buy it from a reseller. They are, again, buy-adobe-software.com. All right, other issues to be aware of. Again, we're not talking about what's new, just compatibility issues. So see the what's new doc for more on that stuff. The URL doesn't say it, but this is new as of 2025. It focuses not only on what's new, but also on changes. So that's why I wanted to point this out, and it's got links to more information. And then there's a release notes. There was with CF25 a release notes, and that's stuff that might be of interest to some of you. And it had a known issues section within there. And there's my link to the known issues. You can use that to get to that. So that's that. Now let's talk about what if you're coming from 23. Well, from 21 and you're skipping 23, what are you going to pay in that bargain? What was changed in 23? Well, the good news is that it was pretty smooth. They didn't do much removals in 23. The only thing that was removed in 23 was the support of Air, Adobe Integrated Runtime. That had been dropped by Adobe in 2019. And finally in 23, they removed the ability in CF to work with it, but virtually nothing anybody did anymore had to do anything with Air. So Nothing else was deprecated. Nothing was retired as of CF 2023. If you looked in the deprecation docs, you'll see that CF 23 is not mentioned very much in that guide. But there was a release notes with a couple of known issues. And again, there's the link to the release notes with the known issues. But for the most part, a move to 21 to 25 won't have much that was been dealt with if you move from 21 to 23. It was pretty quiet. But I'll keep saying this, changes introduced in updates along the way in 23 or in 21 or in 25, those can get you. And that's what this next section is all about. So many CF updates are just security fixes or bug fixes. They don't necessarily add new features, but those security fixes sometimes introduce breaking changes. And usually they're for justifiable security reasons. They're saying, hey, we're trying to protect you and we're closing a little window that used to be open. The problem is you might have been leveraging that window and now the window's closed. So fortunately, they offered some mitigating JVM arguments. Usually whenever they introduced a breaking change in a given update, they said, oh, and that if you want to get that back, if you want to say thank you, but no thank you, I want the windows open, you could reopen that window. So you could still do the update, but relieve that one burdensome thing. And where they were trading compatibility for security, you could say, I want to trade security for compatibility. That's a call you have to make. You have to weigh the risk of removing the protection versus the cost of you just going around and changing your code that got blocked because the window was closed. They might go, what are you talking about, Charlie? Well, first of all, let me tell you, they offered a documentation page that lists all the JVM args new in various updates of CF 2025. There it is. And then they also offered one for CF 23 and 21, and they keep those up to date. Every time there's a new update, if there's a new JVM arg, it would be discussed in the tech note of the update. They also throw it into this page. So I'm just telling you, you guys should keep an eye on these pages and the release notes for each update, of course, but this is a nice summary, and I'm going to summarize it now for you. So typically when Adobe does an update of CF, they update whatever the current release versions are. So if they do an update now in 2026, it's one that's going to affect 25 and 23 because they're still updated. In 2025, last year, when they did updates, that still got updates for 21. So there was a time in 21 till November of last year when they were updating 25 and 23 and 21 whenever they did an update. My point is when they did an update, it updated all three. And usually if they removed a feature, they removed it from all three. And if they added JVM arg, the JVM arg worked in all three. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Now, there was a time in 24 where they did changes, and they would have only affected 23 and 21 because 25 wasn't out yet. Well, they built those changes into 25. So you need to be aware of them. They were part of why things are different in 25. They were introduced in 23 and 21 if you kept them updated. If you didn't, well, you got them when you moved to 25. So let's look at them in recency order, given our focus on 25. And here's a doc page that lists each update to 25 and a doc page that lists each update to 23. So if you didn't know it, you can find each update that's come out, and there's a link to it. And then there is also for 21, each update. But moving on, here's the updates this year from most recent and how they affect 25 and 23. So in August, earlier this month, update 12 of 25, update 23 of 23 came out, and it had some changes affecting WebSockets and the ColdFusion Builder debugger and some XML processing. If you found those things that got changed affected your code, they offered some JVM arguments that said, well, if you want to turn that off, here's how to turn it off. So yes, you could undo those changes. I'm letting you know. I'll leave you to look into it. I gave you the resources. These are the things that got affected. Then in July, last month, there was an update affecting unsafe SQL table identifiers, which wasn't really clear what that's about, but I doubt that affected most people. But if it did, there was a JVM argument that you could say, I want to do unsafe table identifiers. And then in June, there was an update, and there was also changes affecting XML and file uploads. There were certain file CF features, language features that let you upload files. They were trying to tighten down what could be uploaded. Well, you might need to upload something that they don't allow you to update anymore. So there's a JVM arg that would let you continue to do that XML that they wouldn't allow you to do otherwise, or do the file uploads that they're stopping you doing. So that's what we're talking about. Hope that makes sense. Then May update 8 that was mostly the AI features. It was a big update with lots of stuff. Well, they also threw in some security changes affecting query of queries, CF throw, run async, and MongoDB. And if you needed those to continue to work, there were JVM args affecting them. Now, then last year in 2025, I'll just go quickly through these more things: Java deserialization, DDX, WebSockets, data source name, properties, not as important as it might sound. XML processing with external entities could have been a big deal. Again, if you were on update 23 or 25 and kept them up to date, or did CF 2025 update 3 back then, you've already dealt with it. These are if you're moving to 25 and you'd never dealt with any of them, you'll find that some changes are introduced because of these things. And there's JVM args to undo those things if you choose to. So I know it's getting complicated. There's some more. I'd love to talk about it more, but see my blog post in that time frame of May 25 about these couple of things. And schedule task, writing output. You had to whitelist where it would write its output. I mean, if you told the schedule task to publish output, there's a checkbox in the admin. Now you have to whitelist where can schedule tasks publish their output. And then PDF timeout. CFML's bytecode, another thing kind of like the encoding, but I'll leave you to read about that. You can read these blog posts that I did at the time to learn about those. Again, these are things that were already built into 25 out of the box. And then back in 24, there were changes to 23 and 21, and I'll just quickly show you. CFPMT didn't matter to most people. CFFTP should be a matter, but maybe it didn't. Just SFTP, you should be using SFTP. Trust me, there's a lot of people that use CFFTP that don't use SFTP, others that say you shouldn't use FTP at all. But anyway, there were changes back then. And then here was that CFMax compat thing that was way back in June of 2024. And I explained the JVM argument. And then before that, there was this thing about implicit scope searching, which some of you know about. And there were JVM arguments added. Now, the JVM argument that was added to allow this doesn't work in 25, but the JVM argument that was added to allow this, that continues to work in CF 2025, the one about implicit scope searching. Some of you know what that's talking about. At the time, they said it wouldn't be available in 25, but it did. They relented, and it is available. So I know I'm skipping by this, but look, we're running out of time. I just wanted to, make you aware of these things. As far as end of life, you might wonder, well, when does things end? When do updates stop happening? Well, 2023 will continue to get updates into 2028. 2021 stopped getting them in November of last year. 2018, it stopped getting them in 23, and 2016 and 21. You see the 5-year pattern. So we always get 5 years of updates. And so CF 25 will get updates to 2030. But anyway, there's a page that lists this. You don't have to take my word for it. This is the Adobe end of life matrix for all products of Adobe. And I did a blog post when 21 was ending to make people aware of it. And I did one in 2018 when in 2023 when 2018 was ending. All right. And I want to tell you too, I've shared things that Adobe has announced, but you might want to keep an eye on the Adobe bug tracker, tracker.adobe.com, because people will raise issues there. And if you don't use it very much, you might get confused because there's a search box there, but you don't type into that search box at the top. What you do is you click on the search button, search menu link, and then you'll see a drop down for products. You pick ColdFusion as the product, and then you can choose the version. You'd pick CF25 as the version. And if you didn't know a thing else, you just hit submit. You'd get a list of all the most recent bug reports from the most recent bug reports against 25. And you might find somebody bringing up an issue that Adobe and I haven't potentially even talked about. So you might want to do that. It's your call. If you wanted to look for specific terms, you can put any word you want in the title field or the description field, and it will find bug reports that refer to that word. So you might think nobody needs to be shown this. No, trust me. I help people all the time. They don't know how to use that tool. And Adobe keeps saying they're going to be giving us a better tool, but for now we're stuck with that. So if you vote or comment on a bug, then you should get notified if they address it or if other people reply to it. Now, unfortunately, that notification feature keeps failing. And last week it was not working, and I've reported it to Adobe multiple times. I don't know why they can't keep that working. But anyway, they keep saying, well, we're working on a new one. Yeah, we'll get the current one working, please. Now, finally, this is the most important part for some folks, and I know we're right at the top of the hour. Just give me a few more minutes. I want to tell you that you don't have to go this alone. You don't have to dig into all these resources. There are tools that can help you. So first of all, I want to say, how will you ever find these things? first in the free CF Builder VS Code extension. Now, some people don't know that. Like, what? Yes, back to 3 years ago, literally 3 years ago, Adobe came out with a free VS Code extension called ColdFusion Builder. I know some of you use Kamisama K or Gareth's or Ilia's. I know there's many out there, but Adobe created CF Builder as a VS Code extension, and it's free, and it does a lot of great things. Well, one of the things that it does is that as of May of this year, they came out with an update to it that detects removed things. Okay, so I'm going to show you that. I'm going to hop over here to my VS Code. There you go. And I happen to have here a line of code that says CF if parameter exists some variable. So that's how parameter exist worked. Like that was the name of the variable up there called test. And you could just say if parameter exists test, or you could do whatever you want with the parameter exists. Well, notice it's now got a line through it. That's because I'm running that update of CF Builder. You look over here, that little CF icon means I'm running the ColdFusion Builder. And if you're like, what are you talking about? You go to extensions and search for ColdFusion Builder, and there you can see I've got installed the ColdFusion Builder extension. Anyway, if you've got the CF Builder extension installed and configured, and there might be some quirks about configuring it, and trust me, if there's anything about it that doesn't work, I'll just say one more time, just reach out to me. I can help probably in less than 15 minutes sometimes. Certain problems, I can quickly help you solve. And you might go, I shouldn't have to hire somebody. I get it, but some things are just not obvious. And you can read the docs, but who reads docs, right? And you can hope there's videos, but there's not many. So I can help. My point is I can help. So that's one way, is that the tool now marks with a strike through things that are not allowed. And I'll just show you, I've also got a CF header status text thing. So right here's CF header, status code, status text. It's stricken through. You're not allowed to do that anymore. So that's one nice thing, is it does that. But it's not the only tool that can help you. Sorry, I should have removed those two lines. But anyway, there is also, I'll revise that. I added that previous slide today and didn't tweak this next slide. There's the CF Administrator Compatibility Code Analyzer. A lot of people don't know about that. Let me show you real quick. Hopefully, if anybody's got to leave, remember this is all being recorded. You can watch the recording to catch the last several minutes. But I want to show you this. Here's my CF Administrator. And I happen to have a dark reader turned on, so that's why it's nice and dark. Anyway, in the CF Administrator, on the debug button down here, by the way, I'm going to hit refresh because it's been a while. Yep. So on the debug button, across the top, there's a code analyzer. Maybe you've only ever looked at debugger, IP addresses, debug output settings. But way on the right, there's code analyzer. This tool's been here forever. I know some of you are like, everybody knows that. No, trust me, they do not know this. Everybody does not know about this tool. It's been there forever. Every version they provided it. And with it, you could point to a directory using the browse feature. And by the way, starting in CF10, this is a jQuery browse feature. It's not a Java applet like it used to be way back when. So if you haven't tried it in a while, try it. But you can point to any folder you want, anywhere. And it doesn't matter whether the code is, you could put the free developer edition on your machine and have a local copy of your code. If you don't want to do this in production on a server, you can run the free developer edition. You don't need to be running your code. You just need to have your code available. It's going to statically analyze your code. I've got some code set up here to demonstrate this, and you can tell it to analyze subdirectories. You can tell what version that code was on. Now, this is confusing because people think, why don't I see 25? You're on 25. It knows you're on 25. It's saying, well, what was the version that it used to be? I know that's confusing. It's not important that you change it. The point is, you just click run, right? So I'm going to click run. Now, I've got it pointed at the folder that had those two templates in there. So it has some other ones too. So let me just tell you, it tells me, okay, I analyzed that code. I found these errors. I found these things that are informational. I found this total number. Here's what it was. Here's where, when it was. And look, there's that CF header. And if I click on this, it shows me CF 25 modified that, and this window is kind of small and my resolution is kind of big. It says the attribute status text has been removed. Yay! Here's a tool that's telling me things have been removed. Okay? But it doesn't tell us everything. If we look down here, do we see the parameter exists? No. The parameter exists is not here. So unfortunately, if you look down here at the bottom, it says it does not detect the following features. I don't know why, but it doesn't detect if you were using the script CFCs. Doesn't detect if you were using the HTML edit format. The parameter exists to get. I don't know why, but I guess it's because they could look for attributes of tags, but they couldn't feel like they could confidently find function names. I don't know. I give up. The point is they don't find everything. So it's better than nothing, but it's not perfect. I agree 100%. It's not perfect. So moving on, there's all that stuff. It's so funny that I hear somebody else's audio, but there's nobody around. None of you can be sharing your screen. It's so weird. But anyway, yeah, some removed. I should have said some removed. It doesn't detect some removed feature. It detected that status text thing, but it didn't detect the parameter exists use. But check this out. There's one more tool that can help. In fact, it's not free, but it can help. And this is a big deal for some people to hear this. So Pete Freitag, again, great guy, love his tools. He has a commercial tool, command line tool, called Fixinator. You can learn more about it at fixinator.app or at foundeo.com. Fixinator, he came out with it originally in 2019 to be a security scanning tool. You could point it at code and it would analyze for security vulnerabilities. And that was great. Well, back in 2024, he added code compatibility scanning. And so you could tell it, I want to check my code against, CF25 or 23, or against Lucy, or against Box. No, he hadn't done Boxling yet, but he had done Lucy last time I asked a few weeks ago. Anyway, you could use it to help you move from one engine to another, from one version to another. It's cool. So check it out. Here's his blog post describing it. I'll leave you to read about that. And I want to say this again, just like the other one, you don't need it to be on the machine where the code runs. You just need it to be where the code is. And you point it at the code wherever it is. And it could be on a SAN or a NAS, although there could be some, network overhead by doing that. But you just need to be able to statically analyze the code. That's what it does. And now I want to point this out. The base version that is, again, not free, sends code to a secure cloud service that he manages. Nobody ever sees your code, but it's going to a cloud service he manages. If you want it to only stay local to your machine, and it's not AI, this is from before AI, but the point is it's similar to the concept. If you want it to stay locally, then you can buy what he calls the Enterprise Edition, and it would allow you to analyze your code locally. It's more expensive, but if you need it, he's got it. And Pete had also done a helpful blog post on breaking changes. I mentioned that earlier. I just want to show you really quick. I'm going to hop over to my command line. We're almost done, promise. Here, now, by the way, let me just add this. Fixinator does run based on command box. So you don't have to use command box for any other purpose. If you do, great. But I'm saying if you don't use it, you could just use it for the purpose of doing this. Don't want to think that you have to be using command box. You need to be using it because it runs on it, but you don't need to be using it for any purpose other than if you want to do this. And I'm in command box and I've installed Fixinator, and he talks about in his docs about how to do both of those things. So you can learn about that later. But look, I'm in a folder. I'm in that removals folder. I don't happen to have the bullet train on, but I'm in that folder called removals, and I'm going to use Fixinator path equals, and I'm pointing to that parameter exists, which the CF code analyzer didn't find it have a problem. Now check this out. This was added in 2024. You have to say goals equal compatibility, or you could say compatibility comma security, or you could say security, but it defaults to security. If you want to add compatibility, you either tell it to do compatibility or compatibility comma security, and it's goals plural. Anyway, you can read his docs to learn how to do that. I'm just going to hit enter, and it found the code, sent it to a server, did the analysis, came back, and it says, yeah, look, I found that on line 3 of parameter exists.cfm, a high confidence problem, you're using parameter exists, that was removed. And look, he doesn't say use is defined. He follows the more reasonable modern notion of using struct key exists. It's different. You have to do it differently. But anyway, whatever, use one or the other. And he actually, look, he shows using is defined, right? So there's parameter exists, the name of the variable is defined, double quoted name of the variable. This is the more, past 20 years way you would do it. And then, about 15 years ago, people started saying, well, don't do that. Use struct key exists. Anyway, one or the other. The point is, check it out. He found it, and he tells you what to do about it. Okay, so that's what his tool does. And I also happen to have my other one, CF header status text. I'm going to run that. And it says, yep, the attribute of status text was removed, and the fix is remove it. That's all there is to it. Just remove it. So anyway, I love Pete's tools. They're great. Unfortunately, Fixinator is not inexpensive, but it's not expensive. And he offers a bundle of Fixinator and FuseGuard and HackMyCF. And if you have the budget, we're not talking about thousands, we're talking about hundreds of dollars. It's worth looking into. It's a great set of tools. And again, I can help you. Pete can help you. Finally, you don't even have to install CF25 to be able to start playing with things and saying, would this work or will this break or what does this new feature do? There are fiddles that allow you to play with CF2025 code. So you try it without installing it. You just go visit the website. Or what if you installed 25 and something doesn't work and you're like, didn't that work on 23? Well, you can use the fiddle and say, well, let me try it in 23. Does it work there? And you might find out, no, you were wrong. It didn't work in 23 either. And 21, and some of them go back even to 10. Anyway, there's multiple options that let you fiddle around with your code without installing it. So one is literally called cffiddle.org. Now, some people don't know about that. It's from Adobe. It's been around for many years. It's been recently improved, so I recommend you check it out, cffiddle.org, and you can run CFML code. They limit some of the things you can run, so do the other tools, because you have to limit some of them. They can do bad things, but probably 90% of CF code can be run using these tools. The other one some know about, called trycf.com. It lets you do both ColdFusion and Lucy, and I believe now Boxlang. And it's been changed recently. The interface has changed quite dramatically, and it's not everybody's cup of tea, but the point is you can use trycf.com and play with running CF code against different versions. CF Fiddle supports CF 25, 23, 21, I believe. And then now lastly, James Moberg in the CF community has created something he calls CFML Fiddle. It's a way for you to implement your own fiddle locally for yourself, for just yourself, not to open up to others. And it works under the covers with command box, and you tell it you want to run a variant of CF25, and it pulls down the command box 25 for you and prevents an interface where you can type code. Again, the point of fiddles is you're not running your production code or doing a test of your local development environment. You're just saying, hey, I got a window, I type in some CFML, I hit submit, it runs it. That's what a fiddle is. And you can have your own fiddle if you don't want to use these ones on the web. Check out James' CFML Fiddle. I also wanted to say before I wrapped up, Adobe does offer a migration guide. Some of you might wonder, why didn't you mention that yet? The migration guide PDF from Adobe, which is at this link, it's about installation and configuration administration. It's not about migrating code. It's not about the stuff we've talked about. So it's not a bad guide. It's just not what people would expect it to be. So you can look at it if you like. All right. So in summary, sorry, we're 10 minutes beyond what I wanted to end because we started 5 minutes into the hour. There's lots of migration issues to be aware of in any move from an older version of something to a newer version. So keep that in mind. This is not unique to 25. And the problem may not be due to 25. It might be you skipped 23 and something changed in 23 or 21. Or you might have done updates on the 25 that you never did to 23 or 21, or something was built into 25. So just be aware, sometimes your problem that you experience anew in 25, you might have experienced it in 23 or 21 had you just kept it up to date, but a lot of people don't, so they feel like it's a new problem in 25. Or remember, it may be due to moving to the new server and forgetting the application configuration settings or setting IP address correctly or changing file permissions, whatever. And as I said, for some people, even though I've talked about a lot here, I'm telling you, some people, they find their migration to 25 to go quite simply. It just works because those removals are things that have been deprecated for a while. So you may not use them, but maybe you use them. Maybe they're all over the place. And again, sometimes there might be a JVM arg that accommodates them, mitigates them, and makes it suddenly all work. That's why I say it might feel like it's really difficult, but when I work with people, sometimes I see what their problem is. I go, oh, we can just add this JVM argument. We can talk about the pros and cons of it, but at least you can get past that hump and continue your further testing and then decide later if you want to leave it in or do further changes, right? So that's my goal, is just to get people over their humps and get to working in development, in production, whatever. I just hope that the talk has opened your eyes to the possibilities and to be better prepared. That was the goal. And again, I can help. You can send me quick questions by email. We can reach out to me to do a consulting session as little as 15 minutes. We'll solve the problems, identify the causes and the alternatives. I can show you how to leverage these tools that we've talked about today. And here's the way to reach out to me again. Just to remind you, it's been in the bottom right corner also, but there you go. My email address, how to reach me on social medias, and one more time, the presentations are there for you to look at. And with that, I will turn my attention. I've been watching the chat and I haven't seen any more questions in a while. So before we might call it a day, is there anybody that has any either question or comment or feedback or anything at all? And unfortunately, I can't tell. This interface doesn't let me know if you are typing, like Connect used to. I could tell you were typing. So if you might be writing a considerable set of text, cut it to the clipboard and say, yep, just a minute, and I'll wait. Because otherwise, if I don't hear back from anybody in a moment, I'll go ahead and call it a day. Thank you, Kevin. Very kind of you. And again, I can't tell in this interface who's left. I don't know how many people are left. I realize we went over about 10 minutes. So again, you'll get the recording. I'll cut out that first minute and it'll be about 70 minutes. So I hope it was beneficial. I wanted to get it recorded so that people can see it. These recordings being posted on YouTube. I don't mind so much that there aren't many people that come live. The point of the recording there is to help people down the road. They'll find this in the days, weeks, months, and even years from now. There'll be some people moving to the next version of 27 or 29, whatever it'll be, and they might want to go, what was changed? What were the issues of moving to 25? Because we're only moving to 25. Trust me, there's people that are still now only moving to 23. So I point them to my talk on moving to 23. So anyway, looks like that's it. Thanks, Bob. So with that, I'll go ahead and call it a day, and you all enjoy the rest of your days. And I'll have news soon about the next meetup and who it'll be and what the topic will be. Should be in the next week or two. Until then, see y'all.